get boring. The evildoers they get repetitive, especially when you grow to know the truth. You begin to see the signs. They almost become predictable. And I hope I'm not, getting away with the revelation, the whole Revelation 11:8. I'm not trying to hype it up to more than what it is, But then at the same time, I know that there's a relevance to this election date, so I don't want to be like dishonest with the word and not share that word with the brothers and sisters to, check it out for yourself, and it was just kind of the full of fullness just came recently, as, coming up to this time right now, had noticed, I think it was reading Revelation and came across that, and it just kind of like, it was like highlighted spiritually, it was highlighted 11:8. And it was like, Chan, that's actually, the election date and how they postponed it. Cause we was expecting it like last week, but then when we looked into it and they said, no, it's actually the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. I'm like, what? The first Tuesday after the first Monday? I'm like, man, well, Babylonians, Babylon, they keep to their rituals. They'll keep to their rituals. So if that's what they said in their ritual, they're going to seek to do that exact sort of thing right there. That's one thing you can say about the so-called evildoers, or those who worship or follow or serve Satan or serve, the world, flesh, and devil system. If the devil says do it a certain way, they don't even ask about it. But if John says such and such and such, people say, why that? Like, why did there have to be a flood? Why did God have to kill everything? They ask those questions of the good and of the true and of the righteous, and still we will seek to give a good answer. But then when the evildoers say, well, this is the ritualistic time to get your asses to the poll. Get your asses to the Asherah poll. Go out there and vote. You know what I mean? Partake in do your civic duty. Do your worldly service, your secular service. This is your secular service. In the ancient Roman Greek, this was taken as was a Greek, more so, where they had that. But even among the Romans, they had a republican system. Among the Greeks, they had a democratic system. So in Babylon, you got both of those. You got your Republican and your Democrat. You have your red and you have your blue, and then you put those colors together. What do you have? You have that purple. You have that harlot. That harlot that rides on that beast. That rides on that beast and rules over the various different nations and everything. And that's what we got here in America, this melting pot, this modern, this Babylon, this mystery Babylon. Not just America, because these things are not limited, as in the word for today's revelation for this election date, 11:8, Revelation 11:8. It's not just limited, right? It's not just limited to Chan, who's about to bring forward. Yeah, it's not just limited to Anyway, I'll bring forward that revelation. I think God just want me just to move forward with this reasonment right here. So Babylon and the evildoers, they get like predictable, especially in Jah word and through Jah word. They're predictable. You know what I mean? They're very predictable. So a lot of this, many of us already saw like 8 years ago with the whole Obama, the whole Obama and Obamanation sort of thing. We saw this was coming. You know what I mean? But people, they wasn't listening. They wasn't hearing that. They saw something else. They were caught up in the spirit. They was caught up in the spirit of this city. That's what we was about to say about limited. It's not limited just to, like, say, America in that sense, even though America represents, in the eyes, in the eyes of Shemayim, in the eyes of heaven, that Babylon, as far as it does point to a geographic location or origination of evil that will pollute the earth, that has polluted the earth. So we see the same abominations that have been initiated in the north, this north country in North America, be disseminated and sold as like weeds, as bad seed, weeds around the earth. So you see the same thing being repeated. And this is what Babylon is seeking to do, to clone its bad behavior and to clone its evil doings to other nations. Yeah, especially the whole Sodomite activism and the Sodomite agenda. So yeah, Babylon becomes like kind of like Neo in the Matrix movie, where he was fighting Mr. Smith, and he's getting almost like bored of Mr. Smith. Not so much bored, but he can anticipate. And that's how I vibes, we could say feel. That's how I vibes in this present season, but to be faithful to the word and be honest to the dissemination, the revelation, just to go into this a little bit more, from our first words on election, the election day and election date, 2016, which is actually 11/8. And just looking at that word right there about the two witnesses, who are the two witnesses? Looking at this word right here as well. Let's see if we can move this around a little bit. So what do we have here? Let's just show some of the word art, the word art that we have here. We got this right here, Obama, with the inverted rainbow. Remember the previous Torah portion that speaks on how the bow is that sign of Jah covenant, right? You see how it's talking about a covenant of death in the prophets. The prophet, Yeshaya, Isaiah, speaks about how they would be boasting and bragging, how they have made a covenant, a covenant with death, and how he would disannul that covenant with death. It's an interesting word there, but just looking at the whole rainbow, the inverted rainbow. I've heard a lot of people talk a lot of things about the Sodomite activism, the so-called homosexual Sodomite agenda. You see what I'm saying? But very few have really touched on the rainbow and have acknowledged or even recognized that one of the key signs, like almost hiding in plain sight, is the inversion of the rainbow, is the inverting, the turning of the rainbow upside down. And also how, according to the Noah prophecy, the prophecy in the covenant of Noah, the rainbow is a sign of covenant between Jah and man, for good. When they would see the clouds, form, that they would not think that Jah will cause another flood. All right. So he given them the sign of the bow, the sign in the clouds. Now, it's interesting that everywhere where the homosexual or the Sodomite activism is like officially sanctioned, in other words, we find the inversion of the rainbow with the red on top. This is how we know it, with the red on top. It's taking the spectrum of light. It's like turning light upside down. So when they talk about Lucifer, the whole, Lucifer prophecy within the scripture, the Lucifer narrative and the Lucifer prophecy in the scripture, and how Lucifer is supposed to be a light bearer, right? But he fell, Lucifer fell, and the way of describing a fall is with the rainbow turning upside down, the rainbow inverting, because if you understand the symbolic nature of the colors, what the colors are symbolic of, and they don't belong to the so-called homosexuals, because of the Sodomite activism, a lot of ones have been turned off to the rainbow. So you have to think about the spiritual witchcraft that's going on right there. It's like they seek to co-opt something, like we mentioned about the word gay. The word gay was basically hijacked and flipped, right? And really no one can even think about it in the original sense of it. You know what I'm saying? Because like the dog peeing on the tree, claiming ownership, like the animal peeing on something, a dog peeing on something. So now the skunk. So therefore, everybody leaves that alone, even though there is a blessing in it for them. So it's like the righteous, have been going like traumatized in a sense. You're traumatized. You see them, running around with the rainbow everywhere and like claiming ownership for it, like the word gay. You know what I mean? Gay meant happy. So that means that those who violate Jah's law, right, will consider themselves happy, and those who will seek to keep Jah's law would be considered sad, you know? You know what I'm saying? And turning upside down that covenant and taking from humanity that covenant, even through this open and revealed sign and symbol, the rainbow. You know, the rainbow is just so important. So when we saw this picture here, we thought actually that was Photoshopped. You know, I mean, it could be. I'm not too sure if it is. I'm not sure if it is or if it isn't, but it still represents the main fact right there, where you see Biden and Obama, you know, carrying flags, you know, the homosexual sodomite activism agenda flags, or the inverted rainbow, somewhere over the rainbow, somewhere over the inversion of the rainbow right there. So also, it's not just limited there, but we also see right here in the Jebusite state of Jezreel, pseudo falsely called Israel, you see the same thing with the so-called Magen David, or the star of, you know, the hexagram right there in the picture. Those watching the video, you know, the video version of this. All right, but this is what this place is to us when we look at Revelation 11 and 8. All right, how it's connected with Deuteronomy 28 and 68. That's a lot of eights there. Look at that. 28, 68, the date, this election date, 11 and 8, but Revelation 11 and 8. Let's go to Deuteronomy 28 and 68. It says, and Yahweh shall bring, and he who be, and Jah shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. By the way whereof I spake to thee, thou shalt see it no more again, and there y'all, speaking to the lost, found, black and brown sheep in the house of Israel, shall be sold to your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. Now, that word buy you has thrown off some, where some have come to assume that it meant it's not speaking about the enslavement of the black, brown sheep of the house of Israel and all that so-called buying and selling. But the word buying here in this sense needs to be understood Hebraically, and the buying means no man shall redeem you, right? So all these attempts, you know, all these secular attempts to change the situation of the lost, found, black and brown sheep of the house of Israel, you know, these politicians tricking human blood, that's not going to work. And they're going to fail. And we see this dramatically, especially 40 so-called years later, after so-called affirmative action and integration, instead of coming out of Egypt. Right? Actually, the march on Washaitan was actually going down to Egypt and coming into that covenant with the Pharaoh, right? With the Pharaoh federal government of this mystery Babylon, right? This great city that spiritually is known as Sodom and Egypt, where also Adonenu, I Lord, was crucified, aka Americaca, in other words, America, or the United States, this corporation. All right. Remember, chapter 11 is bankruptcy. Chapter 11, Revelation, chapter 11, verse 8, Revelation 11.